His hand shot out like a striking snake. Derek Coleman caught the man's wrist mid-shove, twisted it behind his back, and drove him to his knees in less than 3 seconds. The entire restaurant went dead silent. Every fork stopped. Every conversation died. A 6-year-old girl watched from a corner booth, her crayon frozen in midair, staring at a version of her father she had never seen before. The man on his knees was screaming. His 2 friends were backing away. And the woman at the table, the one they'd been harassing, was staring at Derek like she'd just watched a ghost step out of the shadows. Nobody in that restaurant knew who Derek Coleman really was. But they were about to find out, and so was he. What happened next didn't just change his life. It destroyed the one he'd built, and forced him to confront a past he'd spent 6 years trying to bury. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story traveled. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, because this one's going to stay with you. Derek Coleman hadn't slept in 31 hours. He knew because he'd been counting. Not on purpose. His body just did that now. Tracked the hours like a mission clock, ticking away in the back of his skull, reminding him that he was running on fumes and bad coffee, and the stubborn refusal to let his daughter see him fall apart. He sat in the corner booth at Riverside Bistro with Naya across from him, her small hands wrapped around a green crayon, tongue poking out the side of her mouth as she colored something on the kids' menu. She'd told him it was a horse. It looked like a cloud with legs. He loved it. "Daddy, you're not looking." "I'm looking, Princess." "You're looking at the door." She was right. He was. He was always looking at the door. Every window, every person who walked in or out of any room he was ever in. 8 years of Marine Force reconnaissance had wired his brain that way, and 6 years of civilian life hadn't unwired a damn thing. "I'm looking at your picture and the door," he said. "I'm talented like that." Naya giggled. That sound, that one specific sound, was the only thing in the world that could make Derek Coleman feel like a normal person. Not the decorated operator. Not the man with a classified service record. Not the ghost who'd spent years in places that didn't appear on any map, doing things that would never appear in any report. Just a dad, tired, broke, and sitting in a restaurant he probably shouldn't be spending money in, because his 6-year-old had looked up at him that morning and said, "Daddy, can we go somewhere nice today? Just us." And Derek Coleman, who had once stared down a room full of armed men in a basement in Fallujah without blinking, could not say no to that face. So here they were. "Can we get ice cream after?" Naya asked. "Depends on how much lunch you eat." "I'll eat all of it." "Even the vegetables?" Naya's face scrunched. "Most of it." "We'll negotiate." The waitress came by. Young girl, maybe 20, looked stressed. Lunch rush had the place packed, and she was moving between tables like she was running a relay race. "What can I get you folks?" "She'll have the chicken fingers with a side of fruit. I'll have the club sandwich." Derek paused. "Just water for me." "You don't want a drink, Daddy?" "Water is a drink, baby." Naya looked at him with those eyes. Serena's eyes. Dark brown and too observant for a 6-year-old. And Derek knew she understood more than she let on. She'd learned that just water meant money was tight. That, "we'll see," meant probably not. The daddy's smile sometimes had weight behind it. He hated that she knew those things. The waitress left, and Derek pulled out his phone. 3 notifications. One from the warehouse. Shift change. They needed him tonight instead of tomorrow. One from Naya's school. Permission slip for a field trip to the Science Museum. $45 per student. And one from the electric company. Final notice. He put the phone face down on the table. "Daddy, Mrs. Patterson says we're going to see dinosaur bones." "Yeah? That sounds amazing, Princess." "She says I need to bring the paper home signed. And the money." "I know. I saw it." "Can I go?" Derek looked at his daughter. $45. That was almost exactly what this lunch was going to cost. He could have stayed home, made sandwiches, put the money toward the field trip. But she'd asked for somewhere nice. And somewhere nice shouldn't be a luxury for a 6-year-old girl. "We'll figure it out," he said. Naya nodded slowly. She'd heard that one before, too. "Keep coloring, baby. Food'll be here soon." She went back to her horse cloud, and Derek let his eyes sweep the restaurant again, force of habit, mapping the room without thinking about it. 16 tables, 12 occupied. 2 exits, main entrance, kitchen door to the back alley. 28 civilians, plus staff. The couple by the bar was arguing quietly. The old man reading the paper hadn't turned a page in 10 minutes, which meant he was either thinking hard or sleeping with his eyes open. The businesswoman by the window was... Derek's attention locked. The woman by the window. Mid-30s, professional suit, expensive but not flashy. Laptop open, phone beside it, working through lunch like someone who didn't waste time. She had the posture of someone used to being in charge, confidence without arrogance. But that wasn't why he'd locked on. It was the 3 men who'd just walked through the front door. Late 20s, designer clothes that cost more than Derek's monthly rent. The one in front, tall, athletic build, jaw like he'd been carved out of entitlement, walked like the world was his lobby. The 2 behind him matched his energy. Loud voices, wide strides, taking up space like it was their birthright. Derek's internal threat assessment was already running. It wasn't a choice. It was programming. Body language, aggressive, territorial. Eye movement, focused on the window table. Hands, visible but animated, gesturing ownership. Formation, pack mentality, leader in front, flankers behind. The hostess, a small woman in her 50s, stepped forward with menus. "Welcome to Riverside. I can seat you gentlemen right over..." "We're good." The leader didn't even look at her, just walked past like she was furniture. They headed straight for the window table. Derek's hands stopped moving. The straw he'd been fiddling with went still between his fingers. The woman looked up from her laptop as the 3 men arrived at her table. Her expression shifted. Not fear, not yet. Annoyance. The kind that comes from someone who's dealt with this before. "This is our table." The leader's voice carried across the restaurant. He wasn't asking. "Excuse me?" "Every Thursday, this table. It's ours. So you need to pack up and move." The woman closed her laptop halfway. "I have a reservation. The hostess seated me here. There are plenty of other tables available." "I don't think you heard me." The leader put both hands on her table, leaning forward until his shadow fell over her. "I said move." "And I said no." The second man, bigger, thicker, the kind of build that came from a gym membership and a protein shake addiction, circled behind her chair. Casual about it, like he was just stretching his legs. But the positioning was deliberate. Derek saw it immediately. Flanking maneuver. Create pressure from 2 angles. Make the target feel surrounded. These guys weren't soldiers. They were bullies. But the tactics were the same. "Look," the leader said, his voice dropping into something that was supposed to sound threatening. "My father is Richard Ashford. He owns half the restaurants in this city. I can have the manager move you, or I can call my dad and have him call the manager. Or you can save everyone the trouble and just get up." The woman's voice was steady. "I don't care who your father is. I'm not moving." "Maybe she needs help packing up." The big one behind her reached for her laptop bag. That was the trigger. Not the words, not the posturing, the reach. The physical intrusion into her space. The moment it went from verbal intimidation to physical threat. Derek's body made the decision before his brain finished the calculation. "Naya." His daughter looked up. She'd been watching too. Kids always watched more than adults thought. "Sweetheart, I need you to stay right here in this booth. Don't move. Can you do that for me?" Something crossed Naya's face. She'd never seen her father look like this. His eyes were different. Not angry. Focused. Like every part of him had gone quiet and sharp at the same time. "Okay, Daddy." "That's my girl." Derek stood, pulled his t-shirt straight, rolled his neck once, an old habit, the last physical preparation before contact. And then he walked. 6 strides, not fast, not slow. The pace of a man who knew exactly where he was going and exactly what he was going to do when he got there. He passed between 2 tables without touching either chair. His path was straight, direct, efficient. No wasted movement. The 3 men didn't notice him until he was already there. "Excuse me, gentlemen." His voice was calm, conversational, almost friendly, like he was about to ask for the time. The leader turned, looked Derek up and down. Faded jeans, worn t-shirt with a small stain on the hem, apple juice, courtesy of Naya at breakfast. Work boots that had seen better years. Everything about Derek Coleman said, nobody. "Who the hell are you?" "Just another customer, but I heard the lady say she's not moving, and I think you should respect that." The leader smiled, that particular smile that came from a lifetime of getting his way. "Walk away, man. This isn't your business." "You made it everyone's business when you raised your voice. Half the restaurant is watching. So here's an idea. Find another table, sit down, order some food, and let this woman eat in peace." "Do you know who I am?" You told her. Troy Ashford, son of Richard Ashford, restaurant empire. Very impressive. Now find another table. Troy laughed. He actually laughed, turning to his friends like Derek had just told a joke. "You believe this guy?" He looked back at Derek. "You think because you watched one too many action movies, you can come over here and tell me what to do?" "I think you're harassing a woman who's trying to eat lunch. I think your friend behind her was about to touch your property without permission. And I think if you walk away right now, this stays a conversation. And if I don't, then it becomes something else." The woman at the table spoke up. "Really, it's fine. I can just move. It's not worth—" "You don't have to move," Derek said. He still hadn't raised his voice, hadn't changed his posture. But something in the air had shifted, something the woman felt, something Troy's 2 friends felt, even if Troy himself was too entitled to recognize it. "You were here first. You have every right to sit there." Troy stepped closer, into Derek's space. Chest inflated, chin up. The universal posture of a man who'd never been hit and assumed he never would be. "Listen, bro. I don't know what kind of hero fantasy you've got going on, but let me break it down for you. You're nobody. You're some broke dude in a cheap shirt eating lunch with his kid, and you're about to embarrass yourself in front of her. So do yourself a favor and—" "Careful," Derek said quietly. Just one word, but it landed like a dropped hammer. Troy blinked. For half a second, something in Derek's voice registered. Some instinct buried deep that told Troy this wasn't the usual pushback. This was something different. But entitlement is a hell of an anesthetic. It numbs the survival instincts. "Or what?" Troy leaned in closer. "What are you going to—" His right hand came up, fast, aggressive, a shove aimed at Derek's chest. It never landed. Derek caught the wrist, not grabbed, caught, the way a man catches something he expected, something he'd been waiting for. His fingers found the exact nerve cluster between the radius and ulna, a pressure point most people didn't even know existed, and applied force with surgical precision. Troy's knees buckled. His face went white. He dropped to the floor like someone had cut his strings, and Derek guided him down with the same hand, transitioning into a joint lock that immobilized his arm behind his back. 3 seconds, start to finish. No punch thrown, no wild movement, no anger. Just technique. Clean, efficient, absolute. The restaurant froze. Every sound stopped. Forks down. Conversations dead. 40-some people staring at the man in the faded t-shirt, holding another man on his knees like it was the easiest thing he'd ever done. The big one, Miles, stepped forward, fists balling. I wouldn't. Derek didn't even look at him. Your friend is one rotation away from a dislocated shoulder, and if you take another step, I'll make sure he feels it. Miles stopped. He could see Derek's grip, could see that Troy was gasping, his face twisted in pain. Dude! The third one, Carter, put his hand on Miles's chest. Dude, stop. Look at him. This guy's not playing. Carter was the smart one, the one who could read a room, the one who looked at Derek Coleman and saw what Troy was too arrogant to see. That this wasn't a man pretending to be tough. This was a man holding back. Here's how this goes, Derek said, his voice still calm, still quiet, like he was reading a bedtime story. You're going to apologize to this woman, all 3 of you. Then you're going to leave. Not go to another table. Leave the restaurant. And the next time you feel like bullying someone over a table, I want you to remember this moment. Remember how you ended up on your knees in front of a room full of people because you couldn't handle hearing the word no. Troy was breathing hard. His wrist was turning red. Okay, fine. I'm sorry, lady. I'm sorry. You're friends, too. Miles swallowed hard. Sorry. Carter, already backing toward the door. We're sorry. We're leaving. Derek held Troy for 1 more second. Not to hurt him, to make sure the message set. Then he released. Clean break. Stepped back. Hands at his sides. Troy scrambled up, cradling his wrist, face burning red. Humiliation and rage fighting for control. He opened his mouth. Don't, Derek said. Troy closed his mouth. He turned and walked out. Miles followed. Carter was already by the door. But Troy stopped at the entrance, turned back, looked at Derek one last time with something dark in his eyes. Not fear, not embarrassment. Promise. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call as he walked through the door. Derek stood still for a moment. The restaurant was beginning to breathe again. Whispers, movement, the slow return of normal life. The waitress was staring at him. The old man with the newspaper had actually put it down. The couple at the bar had stopped arguing. Derek's hands were shaking. Not from adrenaline, not from fear, from recognition. From the sickening ease of it all. How naturally his body had moved. How effortlessly the technique had come back. How every neuron in his brain had lit up with something that felt dangerously close to purpose. He'd spent 6 years trying to kill that part of himself, and it had come alive in 3 seconds over a table dispute. He turned to the woman. You okay? She was staring at him, not with fear, with something else. Assessment, like she was calculating something behind her eyes. I'm fine, she said. Thank you, that was... She shook her head. Who are you? Nobody. Just a guy eating lunch with his daughter. He started back toward his booth. His heart was pounding now. The delayed reaction. The adrenaline dump his training had suppressed during the confrontation. He needed to get back to Naya, needed to see her face, needed to remember who he was supposed to be. Naya was sitting exactly where he'd left her, crayon still in her hand, eyes wide. "Daddy?" "Hey, princess." He slid into the booth, reached across, squeezed her hand. "Sorry about that." "That man was being mean to the lady." "He was." "You stopped him." "I did." "How did you do that? The thing with his arm?" Derek looked at his daughter, those dark brown eyes, Serena's eyes, looking at him like he was the whole world and a stranger at the same time. "It's something I learned a long time ago," he said, "before you were born." "Can you teach me?" "Maybe someday. But first, you gotta eat your vegetables." Naya made a face, and just like that, the spell broke. She went back to her coloring. Derek sat back against the booth, exhaled long and slow, and felt the tremor in his hands begin to settle. But his mind wouldn't stop. The way Troy had looked at him before walking out. That look wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't even anger. It was something worse. It was a man who'd never lost before, realizing for the first time that he could, and wanting to make someone pay for that realization. Derek's phone buzzed. The warehouse. They needed him tonight, 6 hours early. Mandatory. He looked at Naya. He looked at the field trip notice he couldn't afford. He looked at the final notice from the electric company glowing on his screen. And in the corner of his vision, he saw the woman from the window table stand, straighten her jacket, close her laptop, and walk directly toward his booth. She stopped at the edge of the table. Up close, Derek noticed details he'd missed from across the room. The tailored suit wasn't just expensive, it was custom. The watch on her wrist was understated but real. This wasn't a woman who worked for someone. This was a woman other people worked for. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but I'm not letting you leave without at least saying a proper thank you." "You don't need to. I'm Vivian Cross." She held out her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, practiced. "And I need to ask you something, and I'd appreciate an honest answer." Derek waited. "Force recon?" The question hit him like a cold wind. He hadn't heard those words from a stranger in years. "How'd you know that?" "My brother, Sergeant First Class, 2nd Recon Battalion. Served 12 years before an IED took his left leg in Helmand Province. I know the bearing. I know the technique. And I know that wrist lock. My brother used to practice it on me when we were kids." She almost smiled. Though he was never that clean with it. Derek said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, "How's your brother doing?" "He runs a nonprofit now. Helps vets transition to civilian work. He'd like you." "I'm not much of a joiner." "No, I can see that." Vivian looked at Naya, then back at Derek. "Can I sit?" Derek hesitated. Every instinct, the trained ones and the fatherly ones, told him to keep distance. But Naya was already looking up at Vivian with curiosity. "I like your watch," Naya said. Vivian smiled. "Thank you. I like your horse." "It's a unicorn." "Of course it is. My mistake." Derek exhaled. "Sit down." Vivian slid into the booth across from him, next to Naya. She didn't rush. Didn't launch into a pitch. She asked Naya about school, about her favorite color, about whether she preferred waffles or pancakes. Naya, usually shy with strangers, opened up like a flower in sunlight. Derek watched, assessed. The woman was good with kids. Natural, not performative. She listened when Naya talked, asked follow-up questions, laughed at the right moments. After 5 minutes, Naya was showing her every page of the kids' menu she'd colored. "She's wonderful," Vivian said to Derek over Naya's head. She's everything." "I can see that." Vivian paused. "Which is why I'm confused about something." "What's that?" "You have the skill set of someone who should be running a protective detail or training federal agents. And you're sitting in this restaurant counting the cost of a club sandwich." She held up a hand before he could respond. "I'm not judging. I'm observing. My brother did the same thing for 2 years after he got out. Worked at a Home Depot, stocked shelves, told himself that was enough." "It is enough." "Is it?" Derek's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you want, Ms. Cross, but I'm not interested in the job pitch over chicken fingers." "Fair enough." Vivian reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. Simple, elegant. Vivian Cross, CEO and founder, Aegis Protection Group. "I run a private security consulting firm. We provide risk assessment, executive protection training, threat management for corporations and high-net-worth individuals. I have 42 employees, 16 of them former special operations or law enforcement." "Good for you." "I need a director of defensive tactics training. Someone who can rebuild our entire curriculum from the ground up." The current program was designed by a man who learned everything from a textbook and has never had someone try to kill him. It shows. "So hire a SEAL, hire a Ranger. There's 100 guys." "I just watched you neutralize a threat in 3 seconds, without throwing a punch, without raising your voice, and without traumatizing your 6-year-old daughter sitting 30 feet away. That's not a skill set I can find in 100 guys. That's not even a skill set I can find in 10. Derek stared at her. The card sat between them on the table like a dare. $90,000 to start, Vivian said. Full benefits, flexible schedule, because I know what it means to build a life around a child. You design the program, you run the training, you report to me. No field work unless you want it. I don't want it. Then you won't have it. Naya tugged Derek's sleeve. Daddy, what's defensive tactics? It's... Derek looked at his daughter. It's teaching people how to stay safe. Like what you did to the mean man? Something like that. You should do it. You're really good at it. Vivian didn't say anything. She didn't need to. A 6-year-old had just made the closing argument. Derek picked up the card, turned it over, put it in his pocket. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. Their food arrived. Vivian ordered coffee and stayed. The conversation shifted. Naya's school, the neighborhood, safe topics. But underneath, Derek felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not hope. Something more dangerous. Possibility. When lunch was over, Vivian paid the bill before Derek could reach for his wallet. He tried to argue. She shut him down with a look that said she was as stubborn as he was. Call me, she said at the door. Even if the answer is no. I'd like to know you made it home safe. Professional courtesy. She shook his hand again, waved goodbye to Naya, and walked to a black SUV in the parking lot. A driver opened her door. Derek watched her go. Daddy, Naya said, pulling his hand. She was nice. Yeah, Derek said. She was. They walked to his truck, a 12-year-old pickup with a dent in the rear fender and the child seat that had seen better days. He buckled Naya in, climbed behind the wheel, and sat there for a moment. The card was in his pocket. The electric bill was on his phone. The field trip notice was in the drawer at home. And somewhere out there, Troy Ashford was making phone calls to someone about the man in the cheap t-shirt who'd put him on his knees. Derek didn't know any of that yet. He started the engine, checked his mirrors, all 3, a habit from convoy driving that he'd never broken. Daddy? Yeah, Princess? You're shaking. Derek looked at his hands on the steering wheel. She was right. The fine tremor was back. Not from the confrontation. That was over. This was something deeper, something cellular. He'd spent 6 years telling himself that Derek Coleman, the operator, was dead. That he'd buried that man next to Serena, put him in the ground with his uniform and his medals and his classified commendations. But dead men don't catch wrists in restaurant. Dead men don't execute joint locks with surgical precision. Dead men don't feel their pulse drop to 50 beats per minute when everyone else's is spiking to 140. The man he'd buried wasn't dead. He was just waiting. "I'm fine, Naya," he said softly. "Daddy's fine." He pulled out of the parking lot and into traffic, and he didn't look at the card again until much later. But it burned in his pocket like a lit match. And somewhere in the back of his mind, under all the fear and the doubt and the weight of single parenthood, a voice he hadn't heard in 6 years whispered 4 words. "You're still in there." That night, Derek worked the warehouse. 12 hours. 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Walking the same concrete floors, checking the same loading docks, scanning the same security monitors that showed the same empty hallways he'd been watching for 2 years. The pay was $17 an hour. The silence was free. Most nights, the silence was fine. Most nights, Derek made his rounds, drank his coffee, read a book between patrols, and counted down the hours until he could pick up Naya from Mrs. Delgado's apartment downstairs, where the old woman watched her overnight for $100 a week. Money Derek couldn't really afford, but couldn't afford not to spend. Tonight, the silence wasn't fine. Tonight, his hands remembered. He sat in the security booth at 2 in the morning, staring at the monitors without seeing them, and flexed his fingers. Open. Closed. Open. Closed. The nerve cluster technique he'd used on Troy Ashford was called a radial peroneal strike. Or at least, that was the textbook name. In recon, they just called it the switch. Flip it on, the body goes down. Flip it off, no permanent damage. Clean. Controlled. He hadn't practiced that technique in 6 years. Hadn't drilled it, hadn't thought about it, hadn't even remembered the specific hand position. But his body remembered. 3 seconds. Muscle memory that lived in his bones like a second skeleton, waiting underneath the tired father and the warehouse guard and the man who clipped coupons on Sunday mornings. Derek pulled Vivian Cross's business card from his wallet. He'd been carrying it since lunch, moving it from his jeans to his uniform, like a man who wasn't ready to throw it away, but wasn't ready to use it either. $90,000. That was more than 3 times what he made now. That was Naya's field trip. That was the electric bill. That was a house with a yard, instead of a 2-bedroom apartment with a leak in the ceiling that the landlord kept promising to fix. That was a life. He put the card down, picked up his phone, opened the calculator app, and started doing math he'd already done in his head 6 times since leaving the restaurant. 90,000, minus taxes, minus rent, or maybe a mortgage if the salary was real, minus childcare, minus groceries, minus the car payment he was 3 weeks behind on. The numbers worked. They more than worked. They changed everything. So why couldn't he make the call? Because making the call meant admitting the truth. That the man who'd put Troy Ashford on his knees wasn't an aberration, wasn't a one-time slip. It was who Derek Coleman actually was. And the warehouse guard, the tired dad, the nobody in the cheap t-shirt, that was the performance. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. 2:17 a.m. Derek stared at it. Nobody called at 2 in the morning with good news. He let it ring. It stopped. Then it buzzed again. Same number. He answered. "Mr. Coleman." The voice was male, calm, professional, the kind of calm that came from practice, not personality. My name is Gerald Voss. I work for Richard Ashford. Derek said nothing. I understand there was an incident today at Riverside Bistro involving Mr. Ashford's son. Troy is spirited, but his father is concerned about the situation. He'd like to meet with you. It's 2 a.m. Mr. Ashford keeps unusual hours, as, apparently, do you. He asked me to extend an invitation. Tomorrow evening, if you're available. His office downtown. What does he want? To talk. Mr. Ashford is a reasonable man. He believes most conflicts can be resolved through conversation. There's no conflict. His son harassed a woman. I asked him to stop. He tried to shove me. I stopped him. End of story. I'm sure it is. But Mr. Ashford would still appreciate a few minutes of your time. He's a generous man, Mr. Coleman. And he likes to know the people in his city. His city? His word, not mine. Can I tell him you'll come? You can tell him I'm not interested. A pause. Measured. I'd encourage you to reconsider. Mr. Ashford tends to follow up on things that interest him. A meeting on friendly terms is always preferable to the alternative. Is that a threat? It's an observation. Good night, Mr. Coleman. The line went dead. Derek set his phone down, stared at the security monitors. His pulse hadn't changed. Steady 54 beats per minute, the resting heart rate of a man whose body had been conditioned to stay calm under pressure. But his mind was racing. Richard Ashford knew his name, knew his phone number, knew where he worked. That meant someone had pulled the restaurant's security footage, identified him, and run a background check, all in less than 12 hours. That took resources. That took connections. That took the kind of power that didn't play by normal rules. And they'd called him at 2 a.m. to make sure he knew it. Derek finished his shift at 6, drove home in the gray morning light. Mrs. Delgado was already awake, making coffee in her apartment, with the door open, like she always did. She slept good, Mrs. Delgado said, handing him a cup. No bad dreams tonight. Thank you, Maria. You look tired. More tired than usual. Long night. Every night is a long night for you, mijo. When are you going to find a better job? Derek took a sip. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Working on it. He carried Naya upstairs. She was still half asleep, curled against his chest like she'd done since she was a baby. He laid her in her bed, pulled the covers up, and stood there watching her breathe. This was the moment. Every morning, this was the moment that made it all worth it. The soft rise and fall of her chest, the way her fingers curled around the edge of her blanket, the absolute trust of a child sleeping safely because her father was standing guard. He'd done this in war zones, not with Naya, with Marines. Watched them sleep in 2-hour rotations in places where sleep was a luxury and the price of relaxation was death. He'd stood guard then because it was duty. He stood guard now because it was love. He couldn't tell if there was a difference anymore. Derek showered, changed, made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, the last of the orange juice. Naya came out of her room at 7, hair wild, rubbing her eyes. Morning, Princess. Morning, Daddy. She climbed into her chair and looked at her plate. Can I have pancakes? We're out of mix. Tomorrow, I promise. You said that yesterday. Then I owe you 2 days of pancakes. Naya ate her eggs without complaint. She was good at that, adjusting, accepting, making the best of things. A 6-year-old shouldn't have to be that good at it. Daddy, are you going to call the watch lady? Derek paused, fork halfway to his mouth. The watch lady? The pretty lady from the restaurant, with the nice watch. She gave you a card. You remember that, huh? She said you could teach people how to stay safe. For $90,000. Naya said the number like it was a magical incantation. To her, it might as well have been. That's a lot of money, right? It's a lot of money. More than the warehouse? A lot more than the warehouse. Then why don't you call her? Derek set down his fork. How did you explain to a 6-year-old that the thing that made you valuable was the same thing that scared you? That the skills Vivian Cross wanted to pay for were born from violence, refined through combat, sharpened by years of doing things that still woke him up at 3 a.m. with his heart slamming against his ribs? It's complicated, baby. Grown-ups always say that when it's not really complicated. He almost laughed. Serena would have said the exact same thing, word for word. You're too smart for 6, you know that? Mrs. Patterson says I have emotional intelligence. Mrs. Patterson is right. Derek reached across the table and tucked a stray braid behind Naya's ear. I'll think about it. For real this time. Promise? Promise. He walked her to school, watched her disappear through the front doors with her backpack bouncing, turning once to wave. He waved back, held the smile until she was inside, then let it fall. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, different from last night's call. Mr. Ashford would like to reiterate his invitation, 6 p.m., the Ashford Building, 14th floor. He has a proposition that may interest you. Derek deleted it. 3 hours later, he was sitting in his apartment, staring at 2 things on the kitchen table. Vivian Cross's business card on the left, his phone with a deleted text on the right. 2 paths, 2 doors, 2 versions of what his skills could become. He knew he should call Vivian. Everything logical pointed there. Good salary, honest work, a chance to use what he knew without going back to the darkness, a chance to give Naya the life she deserved. But something else pulled at him. Not Ashford's invitation. He had no interest in that. It was deeper. The fear that had been growing since the restaurant. The fear that once he opened that door, the door to his old self, his old skills, his old capabilities, he wouldn't be able to close it again. Because in that restaurant, for those 3 seconds, Derek Coleman hadn't felt tired, or broke, or invisible. He'd felt alive. More alive than he'd felt in 6 years. And that terrified him more than any threat Richard Ashford could make. His phone rang. Not the unknown number. A number he recognized. Derek, it's Ray. Raymond Ortiz, his supervisor at the warehouse. Good man, ex-Army, understood veterans. Listen, I gotta tell you something and I don't know how to say it other than straight. Say it straight then. They're cutting your hours, effective next week, down to 3 shifts instead of 5. Derek's stomach dropped. Why? Budget cuts, they said. But Derek, man, it's only you. Everyone else keeps their schedule. They called me this morning and told me to adjust your rotation. Who called? Corporate. Some guy I've never talked to before. Said they were restructuring the overnight team. But it stinks, Derek. I've been here 11 years, and I've never seen them single one guy out like this. Derek closed his eyes. 3 shifts. That was barely $1,000 a month before taxes. That wasn't tight. That was impossible. There's something else, Ray said, and I don't want to freak you out. But after the call, I looked up who owns the holding company that contracts our security services. I was curious. And? Ashford Properties, LLC. It's a subsidiary of Ashford Enterprises. The silence on the line was heavy. Derek, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Is there something going on? Something I should know about? No, it's fine. Thanks for the heads up, Ray. Derek, I said it's fine. He hung up, set the phone down, stared at it. Richard Ashford owned the company that contracted the warehouse security, which meant Richard Ashford, with one phone call, could cut Derek's hours, change his shifts, or eliminate his job entirely. And he'd done exactly that, less than 24 hours after his son had been put on his knees in a restaurant. This wasn't a threat. This was a demonstration. A man showing Derek exactly how much power he had, how many strings he could pull, how easily he could squeeze. And it was just the beginning. Derek knew men like Ashford. He'd seen them in every theater of war. Men who didn't fight their own battles, who used money and influence the way Derek used his hands. Precise, patient, relentless. The pressure would increase. The hours would shrink further. Something would happen with the apartment, or the car, or Naya's school. Small things, invisible things. The kind of warfare that left no marks and no evidence. Just a slow tightening of the noose until the target either broke or complied. Derek looked at the kitchen table. 2 cards, 2 paths. But now one of the paths was eroding under his feet. He picked up his phone and dialed. Vivian Cross answered on the second ring. Derek, not surprised, like she'd been expecting the call. I'm glad you reached out. I want to talk about the position. Good. Can you come in tomorrow? Say 10 a.m.? I'll be there. But Vivian, I need to tell you something first. I'm listening. The man from the restaurant, Troy Ashford. His father is Richard Ashford. A pause, longer than Derek expected. When Vivian spoke again, her voice was different, sharper. The CEO, not the woman from lunch. I know who Richard Ashford is. His people called me last night. 2 a.m. They want a meeting. I said no. This morning, my hours at the warehouse got cut. The warehouse's security contract runs through an Ashford subsidiary. Another pause. He's squeezing you. Yes. How bad? 3 shifts a week instead of 5. I can't survive on that. Not with Naya. Derek, listen to me carefully. Richard Ashford is a bully with a checkbook. He's used to people folding. That's his entire playbook. Apply pressure until the other person gives in or goes away. He does it to business competitors, to journalists, to anyone who inconveniences him. I'm not going to fold. I know you're not. That's why I'm telling you this. When you don't fold, he escalates. He'll go after your lease, your car, anything financial he can touch. He'll try to make your life unlivable until you come to his table on his terms. You sound like you've dealt with him before. One of my clients had a dispute with Ashford Properties 2 years ago. It got ugly. Ashford hired private investigators, filed frivolous lawsuits, tried to poach my client's employees. The man plays a long game, and he plays it dirty. Derek felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He'd survived war zones, interrogation resistance training, 48-hour operations in hostile territory with no extraction plan. But none of that had prepared him for a man who could dismantle his life with phone calls. So, what do I do? You come work for me. Tomorrow. We'll get you on payroll immediately. Once you're part of Aegis, Ashford loses his leverage. Your income isn't dependent on his companies anymore. Your housing, your benefits, your stability, all independent. You'd do that? You barely know me. I know enough. I know you stood up when everyone else sat down. I know you're the kind of man Ashford can't buy, which means you're the kind of man I need. And I know that right now, a 6-year-old girl is counting on you to figure this out. Derek's throat tightened. He looked across the apartment at Naya's bedroom door, decorated with stickers and a crayon drawing that said, "Naya's room. No monsters allowed." 10 a.m., he said. "I'll be there. Bring your DD-214. And Derek?" "Yeah?" "Wear something nice. You're interviewing for a director-level position, not guarding a warehouse." He almost smiled. Almost. "Yes, ma'am." After he hung up, he sat for a long time in the quiet apartment. The refrigerator hummed. Traffic moved outside. Somewhere down the hall, Mrs. Delgado's television played a telenovela through thin walls. Derek opened the drawer where he kept the things he didn't want to look at. Bills. Notices. And underneath them, in a manila envelope, his DD-214, the official record of his military discharge. Honorable. 8 years of service condensed into a single page of codes and dates and carefully sanitized descriptions of what he'd actually done. He pulled it out, read it for the first time in years. MOS 0321. Reconnaissance Man. Deployments. Classified. Awards. Classified. Special skills. Classified, classified, classified. 3 classifieds in a row. Each one a chapter of his life that didn't officially exist. Operations he couldn't talk about. People he'd been ordered to forget. Things he'd done that were necessary and legal and sanctioned by his government, and that still sat in his chest like shrapnel. Not killing him, just there, reminding him with every breath that the cost of service didn't end when the uniform came off. He put the DD-214 on the table next to Vivian's card. Picked up his phone one more time. No new messages from Ashford's people. They were letting the silence do the work. Letting him sit with the reduced hours and the financial pressure and the unspoken promise that it could get worse. Derek had been tortured once. Not the movie kind, the real kind. 72 hours during SEER training, designed to simulate enemy capture. Sleep deprivation, stress positions, psychological manipulation. The instructors had broken every other candidate in his class within 48 hours. Derek had lasted the full 72. Not because he was tougher, because he'd learned a secret that most people never figured out. Pain was temporary, but the decision you made under pressure lasted forever. You could endure anything if you knew that the choice you were making was the right one. Ashford was applying pressure. The right choice was to not bend. Derek put everything back in the drawer except the DD-214 and Vivian's card. He set his alarm for 8 a.m. He picked up Naya from school, made dinner, helped her with her homework, read her a story about a brave princess who fought a dragon. "Daddy, I think the dragon is just misunderstood," and put her to bed. Then he went to his closet. In the back, behind the work uniforms and the old jackets, was a garment bag he hadn't opened in 6 years. Inside was a suit, dark charcoal. He'd bought it for Serena's funeral. Hadn't worn it since. He took it out, hung it on the door, checked for moths, wrinkles. It still fit. He'd kept the same build. Not intentionally, but the nighttime training in the warehouse had maintained what the Marines had built. He laid out a white shirt, found a tie, the only one he owned. Dark blue. Serena had picked it out. Said it made his eyes look serious. "You always look serious," she'd told him. "But this time makes it look intentional." He could still hear her voice. 6 years, and he could still hear it. Not fading, not exactly. More like a frequency his brain had memorized. Always there, just below the surface, waiting for the quiet moments to come through. "I'm trying, Serena," he said to the empty room. "I'm trying to do this right." The suit hung on the door like an answer that hadn't been spoken yet. The DD-214 sat on the table like a past that wouldn't stay buried. And somewhere across the city, Richard Ashford was sitting in his office on the 14th floor, making plans for a man who'd embarrassed his son. And Naya slept, peaceful, trusting, unaware that her father's world was shifting under him like tectonic plates, and that the earthquake was just beginning. Derek Coleman set his alarm, lay down on the couch. He'd given Naya the bedroom a year ago, and closed his eyes. He didn't sleep. He never really did. But he planned. He was 20 minutes early. Derek sat in his truck in the parking lot of Aegis Protection Group, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, wearing a dead woman's favorite tie and a suit he'd bought to bury her in. The irony wasn't lost on him. The last time he'd worn this suit, he was saying goodbye to the only person who'd ever made him feel like the man underneath the operator mattered. Now he was wearing it to walk back toward the world she'd helped him leave. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. The suit still fit. The tie was straight. His eyes looked like someone who hadn't slept in 36 hours, because he hadn't. But there was something else there, too. Something sharper. Something that had been buried under 2 years of warehouse fluorescent lights and was now pushing its way to the surface like a root through concrete. He got out, walked to the entrance. The building was unmarked from the outside. No flashy signs, no logos. Just a street number and a reinforced glass door. That told Derek everything he needed to know. Vivian Cross didn't advertise. She didn't need to. The receptionist looked up. Young, professional, former military, Derek could tell from the posture. Derek Coleman, I have a 10 o'clock with Ms. Cross. She's expecting you. Down the hall, last door on the left. Derek walked. His footsteps were silent out of habit, heel to toe, weight distributed. The way he'd moved through buildings for 8 years, when noise meant death. He caught himself doing it and almost laughed. Old ghosts in new hallways. Vivian's office door was open. She was on the phone, pacing behind her desk, speaking in clipped, precise sentences. When she saw him, she held up one finger, finished the call, and hung up. You're early. Force of habit. Good habit. She looked at the suit. Something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, like she understood that this suit had a history. She didn't ask. Sit down. Let's talk. Derek sat. The chair was comfortable. The desk between them was clean. Laptop, phone, a single framed photograph. A man in marine dress blues, one leg missing below the knee, grinning like the world was a joke only he understood. Your brother? Marcus, taken 3 weeks after he got his prosthetic. He said he wanted to document the moment he became, and I'm quoting, 20% more aerodynamic. Derek almost smiled. Sounds like a recon Marine. He's insufferable. Vivian sat down across from him. Let's get into it. I don't do long interviews, Derek. I've already seen what I need to see. What I want to understand is how you think. About what? About force. About protection. About the line between necessary and excessive. She leaned back. Give me a scenario. You're running a protective detail for a corporate CEO. Public event. Crowd of 300. Your advance team identifies a potential threat. A man matching a description from a prior threat assessment. He's moving toward your principal. He reaches into his jacket. What do you do? What kind of event? Charity gala. Indoor venue. How close is the threat to the principal? 30 feet and closing. Is my team in position? 2 agents flanking, 1 at the exit. Derek didn't hesitate. I redirect the principal, move her toward the exit agent. I don't engage the threat directly unless he produces a weapon. If he's reaching into his jacket, that could be a phone, a wallet, an invitation. 30 feet is enough distance to redirect without confrontation. If I'm wrong and he's armed, my flanking agents are positioned to intercept while I evacuate. Most people say they'd tackle the threat. Most people have never worked a protective detail. The principal's safety is the mission. Everything else is noise. You don't win by fighting. You win by making sure the person you're protecting never sees the fight. Vivian studied him, that same look from the restaurant, calculating, assessing, measuring something only she could see. What if the threat reaches the principal before you can redirect? Then I put myself between them, physically, and I use the minimum force necessary to create distance while my team evacuates. Minimum force. That's interesting. Most operators I interview talk about neutralizing threats, eliminating danger. You keep coming back to minimum force. Because maximum force is easy. Anyone can escalate. The skill is in controlling a situation without destroying it. You can't protect someone if you've turned the room into a war zone. Where did you learn that? The hard way. Vivian waited. She was good at silence. The kind of silence that made people feel it. An interview technique. Derek recognized it because he'd been trained to resist it. But this wasn't an interrogation. This was a conversation. So he let himself answer. Second deployment. My team was running an operation in a village. I can't say where. We had intelligence that a high-value target was hiding in a specific compound. Standard approach would have been hard entry. Breach, clear, secure. Fast and violent. What happened? I looked at the compound. I looked at the village. Kids playing in the street. Women carrying water. An old man sitting by a door, watching us like he'd been watching soldiers his whole life and was tired of it. Derek paused. I told my team we were going to knock. Knock. Walk up to the front door and knock. Ask to come in. Like human beings. And? The old man opened the door. He knew why we were there. He told us the target had left 2 hours earlier, gave us the direction. We tracked him and picked him up 6 miles north without firing a shot. No casualties, no collateral damage, no village full of people who'd remember American soldiers kicking in their doors. What did your commanding officer say? That I got lucky. That knocking was reckless and I should have followed standard operating procedure. What do you think? I think I was right, and I think he knew it because he never wrote it up. Vivian stood, walked to her window, stood there for a moment with her back to him, and when she turned around, her expression had changed. The interview was over. The decision was made. I'm offering you the position, Derek. Director of Defensive Tactics Training. $90,000 to start, full benefits. You build the curriculum from scratch. You train the trainers. You answer to me and nobody else. I have conditions. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Naya comes first, always. If she's sick, I'm not here. If her school calls, I leave. No exceptions. Agreed. I don't carry a weapon, not anymore. If the job requires me to be armed, I'm not your guy. Vivian tilted her head. Can I ask why? Because I'm too good with them, and I made a promise to someone that I'd stop being that person. Your wife? Myself. At her grave. The day I buried her. The room went quiet. Not uncomfortable. Respectful. The kind of quiet that happens when two people recognize the weight of what's been said. Agreed, Vivian said. Anything else? Yeah. Tell me about Richard Ashford. Vivian's expression hardened. Not anger, preparation. Like she'd been waiting for this. What do you want to know? Everything. Because I have a feeling that what happened at the restaurant isn't going to stay at the restaurant. Vivian sat back down. Richard Ashford is 63 years old. Started with 2 restaurants in the 90s. Now he owns 14, plus commercial real estate, a construction company, and a handful of shell corporations that are harder to trace. He sits on 3 city boards. He donates to both parties. He plays golf with the police chief. So he's connected. He's insulated. There's a difference. Connected means people like you. Insulated means people fear you. Ashford doesn't have friends. He has leveraged relationships. Everyone owes him something, and he keeps careful track of the debts. And his son? Troy is the youngest. There are 2 older brothers who actually run the business. Troy is the pet project. Daddy's favorite. Never told no, given a corner office and a title, but no real responsibility. He's a liability, and Richard knows it. But he protects him anyway, because Troy is his mirror. The man Richard wishes he still was. Young, aggressive, untouchable. So when I put Troy on his knees, you didn't just embarrass Troy. You cracked the mirror, and Richard won't forgive that. Derek processed this, filed it, assessed the threat level the way he would have assessed an enemy combatant's capabilities. He already cut my hours at the warehouse. That's step 1. Step 1 is always financial. Make you feel it in your wallet. Step 2 will be legal or administrative, something that complicates your life. A code violation on your apartment, a problem with your car registration, a complaint filed with Child Protective Services. Derek's blood went cold. CPS? He's done it before. 2 years ago, a contractor disputed a payment with Ashford Properties. The contractor was a single mother. Within a month, CPS showed up at her door based on an anonymous tip. The investigation found nothing, but it took 4 months to close. 4 months of home visits, interviews, scrutiny. Her kids were terrified. She settled the dispute on Ashford's terms the next day. He'd go after Naya? He'd go after your custody. Not directly. He's too smart for that. An anonymous tip. A concerned citizen. All it takes is one phone call to start an investigation. And once that door opens, it doesn't close quickly. Especially for a single father working overnight shifts and leaving his child with an unlicensed caregiver. Derek's hands clenched. For the first time since the restaurant, he felt something other than control. He felt rage. Pure, clean, dangerous rage. The kind that used to fuel him through operations. The kind he'd spent 6 years learning to smother.
If he touches my daughter, he won't touch her. That's the point. He'll use the system. Paperwork, phone calls, bureaucracy. He'll never get his hands dirty, and you'll never be able to prove he was behind it. So what do? You make yourself untouchable. You come work here. You establish financial stability, professional credibility, documented childcare arrangements. You build a life that no anonymous tip can shake. And you do it fast, because Ashford doesn't wait. Derek stared at her. You planned this. Excuse me? You knew about Ashford before I called you. You knew what he'd do. That's why you pushed the job offer so hard at the restaurant. You weren't just recruiting. You were protecting. Vivian held his gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't deny. My brother lost 3 years of his life after the Marines because nobody was there to catch him. He spiraled. Drinking, isolation, nearly ate his service weapon on a Tuesday night in February because he couldn't figure out who he was without a mission. She paused. Someone caught him. A therapist at the VA who saw what he was and wouldn't let go. She saved his life. He married her. They have 2 kids. That's a nice story. It doesn't answer my question. Yes, Derek. I knew who Troy Ashford was when he walked into that restaurant. I recognized him. I've seen his picture in business journals next to his father's. And when you intervened,
I knew exactly what would follow. So yes, I pushed the offer because I saw a good man about to walk into a situation he didn't understand, with skills he was wasting, and a daughter he couldn't afford to lose. You could have warned me.
Would you have taken the card if I'd said, "By the way, the man you just humiliated is the son of one of the most vindictive power brokers in the city"? Or would you have thrown it away and told yourself it wasn't your problem? Derek didn't answer, because she was right. I'm not your enemy, Derek. I'm your way out. Take the job. Build the life. Let Ashford swing at a target that isn't there anymore. Derek sat with it. The rage was still there, coiled, patient, waiting. But underneath it, something else was forming. Strategy. The same tactical thinking that had kept him alive in places where death was the default outcome. Ashford wanted a war of pressure. Financial, legal, administrative. He wanted Derek to feel helpless, to come crawling to that 14th floor office and beg for mercy. But Derek Coleman didn't crawl, and he didn't beg, and he sure as hell didn't lose wars of attrition. When do I start? Right now if you want. HR can process your paperwork today. First paycheck in 2 weeks, but I can advance you if you need it. I need it. The words cost him something. Pride, maybe, or the illusion of pride that poor people carry like armor. Naya's field trip is next week. $45. Vivian didn't blink, didn't offer sympathy, just nodded. Done. What else? Mrs. Delgado. She watches Naya overnight while I work. She's not licensed. If Ashford goes the CPS route, I have a contact. Licensed child care provider. Former military spouse. She runs an overnight program for first responders' kids. I'll make the introduction today. Derek studied her. This woman operated the way he did. 3 steps ahead, contingencies planned, resources allocated before the problem fully materialized. You're good at this, he said. I should be. I've been doing it for 12 years. Vivian stood, extended her hand. Welcome to Aegis, Derek. He shook it. Firm. Professional. But something passed between them in that handshake. Not attraction, not friendship. Recognition. 2 people who understood that the world was harder than it pretended to be, and that surviving it required more than good intentions. I want to see the training facility, Derek said. I'll walk you through it. The facility was impressive. 3 training rooms, 1 for hand-to-hand, 1 for scenario simulation, 1 classroom style. The equipment was good but underused. The mats were too clean, the scenario props too organized. This was a program that existed on paper, but hadn't been pushed in practice. Derek ran his hand along the wall of the main training room. Who designed your current curriculum? A consultant, former Secret Service. Smart guy, great credentials. Never been in a real fight in his life. I can tell. Your scenario room is set up for linear engagements. Threat approaches from the front, agent responds. Real threats don't come from the front. They come from the angle you're not watching. The door you didn't check. The person who was there before you arrived. That's exactly why I need you. Derek spent the next 2 hours walking the facility, making notes, asking questions. He met 3 of Vivian's senior trainers, a former Army Ranger named Paul, a retired FBI agent named Diana, and an ex-LAPD SWAT officer named James. All solid, all experienced, all looking at Derek with the cautious respect of professionals assessing a new alpha in the room. Paul was the first to test him. So, Force Recon. He said it casually, leaning against the wall of the training room. That's a lot of crawling through mud and eating bugs. How does that translate to corporate security? The bugs taught me patience. The mud taught me humility. The rest taught me how to keep people alive when everything goes wrong.
We had a recon guy apply last year. Couldn't adapt. Too aggressive. Kept treating every scenario like a kill or be killed situation. Then he wasn't recon. He was a guy who went through recon training and missed the point. What's the point? The point is that the most dangerous skill isn't knowing how to fight. It's knowing how to see. You read the room before you enter it. You identify the threat before it materializes. You create space before contact is made. If you're fighting, something already went wrong. Paul stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I can work with that. Diana was more direct. Vivian says you took down a guy in a restaurant with a wrist lock. That true? It was a nerve compression technique. And yes. 3 seconds? About that. Show me. Derek looked at her. She was in her 50s, compact, fit, with the eyes of someone who'd spent decades reading liars. She was testing him a different way. Not his philosophy, his capability. You sure? I'm a big girl. Okay. Grab my shirt.
Like you're going to shove me. Diana reached out. Her hand gripped his collar, firm, committed. Derek moved. Not fast, deliberately slow, so she could feel every stage. Redirect the energy. Capture the wrist. Rotate. Apply pressure to the nerve cluster. Guide down. Diana was on one knee in 2 seconds. She could feel the lock, the way her entire arm was compromised, the way one small adjustment would send white-hot pain through her shoulder. I'm at maybe 30% pressure, Derek said calmly. Full application, your shoulder dislocates. Half application, you can't use the arm for 20 minutes. At 30%, it hurts, but there's no damage. The point isn't to injure. The point is to control. Release. He let go instantly, clean. Diana stood, rotated her wrist, flexed her fingers. That's the cleanest lock I've ever felt, she said. And I trained with the Bureau's best defensive tactics instructors for 15 years. Your Bureau instructors were teaching law enforcement techniques. I was taught combat applications modified for capture operations. Different starting point, same principle. Control the body, control the situation. James, the SWAT officer, hadn't said a word during any of this. He'd been watching from the corner, arms crossed, face unreadable. Now he spoke. What about when control isn't enough? What about when someone's shooting and your wrist locks don't matter? Then you weren't doing your job right. Because if someone's shooting, you failed 3 steps earlier. You failed in threat assessment. You failed in advance work. You failed in positioning. A gunshot is the last link in a chain that started with someone not paying attention. That's a nice theory. In practice, people die. Yes, they do. I've watched them. Derek's voice didn't change, but something in the room shifted. The temperature, the weight of the air. I've held Marines while they bled out in places you've never heard of. I've made decisions in fractions of seconds that determined who lived and who didn't. And every single one of those decisions haunts me. Which is exactly why I'm standing here, telling you that the goal is to never reach that point. Because once you do, someone loses, and it might be you. James uncrossed his arms. The challenge in his posture softened. Not submission, respect. The kind that only came from one professional recognizing another. Fair enough, James said. Vivian had been watching the entire exchange from the doorway. She hadn't intervened, hadn't needed to. Derek had handled her team the same way he'd handled Troy Ashford, with calm authority and absolute control. Well, she said, I think that settles any questions about qualifications. Derek turned to her.
I want to rebuild the entire program. Ground up. New curriculum, new scenarios, new evaluation metrics.
Your current setup trains people to react. I'm going to train them to prevent.
How long?
Give me 3 months for the framework, 6 months for full implementation, a year to make it the best program in the region.
You have it.
Derek nodded. Looked around the training room one more time. Felt the mats under his feet. Smelled the faint rubber and sweat that every training facility in the world shared, from Camp Pendleton to Quantico to this converted office building. For 6 years, he'd told himself he was done with this world, that the skills he'd built were weapons he'd decommissioned, that being a good father meant being a smaller version of himself. Standing in this room, surrounded by people who spoke his language, who understood what it meant to carry the weight of capability, he realized the truth. He hadn't been protecting Naya by shrinking. He'd been failing her. Because a smaller version of Derek Coleman couldn't pay for field trips, couldn't keep the lights on, couldn't defend against a man like Richard Ashford, who used money and power the way Derek used his hands. Naya didn't need a smaller father. She needed the real one. All of him. The discipline and the danger. The gentleness and the steel. The man who could read a bedtime story and read a room with equal fluency. He just had to figure out how to be both without losing either. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. Another unknown number. A text. "Last invitation, Mr. Coleman. Mr. Ashford doesn't ask 3 times. Derek read it. Read it again. Then typed a response. The first and only one he would ever send to anyone associated with Richard Ashford. Then he should stop asking. He hit send. Put the phone away. Looked at Vivian. "I'm going to need that advance, and a copy of your current client list, and everything you have on Ashford properties, business filings, subsidiary structures, board connections, all of it." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "You're not just taking this job. You're preparing a defense." "I'm a Marine, Vivian. We don't wait to be attacked. We map the terrain. And right now, Richard Ashford is the terrain." She smiled. Not the polite professional smile from the restaurant. A real one. The kind that reached her eyes and said she'd been waiting for someone to walk through her door and say exactly that. "Welcome to Aegis, Derek. Let's go to work." The first 3 months nearly broke him in ways combat never had. Not the work. The work was natural. Derek rebuilt Aegis's defensive tactics curriculum from the ground up, spending nights at the kitchen table after Naya fell asleep, writing training modules on legal pads because he couldn't afford a laptop yet. He mapped scenarios based on real operations, stripped the classified details, and rebuilt them as corporate security exercises. He designed evaluation protocols that tested judgment before technique, restraint before reaction, awareness before action. The work was the easy part. The hard part was everything else. His first training session was a disaster. 12 trainees, former cops, former military, private security veterans, all of them looking at Derek like he was a substitute teacher on the first day. Paul sat in the back with his arms crossed. Diana leaned against the wall. James didn't even bother showing up. "My name is Derek Coleman," he said. "I'm your new Director of Defensive Tactics Training. Starting today, everything you think you know about protective response is going to change." A hand went up. Big guy, ex-Chicago PD, neck like a fire hydrant. Name tag said, Briggs. "Yeah, we heard about you, the restaurant guy. Wrist locked some rich kid over a table." That's one way to describe it. With all due respect, one bar fight doesn't qualify someone to redesign our entire program. Some of us have been in actual gunfights. Derek looked at Briggs, looked at the room. 12 faces, all thinking some version of the same thing.
Who is this guy? Stand up, Derek said. What? Stand up. Come to the front. Briggs stood. 6'3", 240, thick through the chest and shoulders. He walked to the front with the swagger of a man who'd been the biggest person in most rooms his entire life. Attack me, Derek said. Briggs laughed. You serious? You said a wrist lock doesn't qualify me. So attack me. Whatever you want. Full speed. I'm not going to attack. You afraid? Briggs' jaw tightened. The room went still. Derek had just done the one thing guaranteed to make a former cop commit. He'd questioned his courage in front of his peers. Briggs came at him fast. Right cross, textbook. The kind of punch that had probably dropped 100 suspects on the streets of Chicago. Powerful, committed, predictable. Derek moved, not away, into it. He redirected the punch with his left forearm, stepped inside Briggs's reach, and executed a standing arm drag that spun the bigger man off balance. Before Briggs could recover, Derek was behind him. Both arms controlled, weight shifted forward so that Briggs was bent at the waist with zero leverage. In a combat situation, you're dead right now, Derek said calmly, not breathing hard. I have access to your spine, your neck, and both kidneys. In a protection situation, you're neutralized, and my principal is already being evacuated by my team. He released Briggs, stepped back. The big man straightened up, rolled his shoulders, and turned around. How'd you do that? I outweigh you by 60 pounds. 63, and weight doesn't matter when you're off balance. You committed to a linear attack. I redirected your momentum and used your weight against you. The bigger you are, the easier that is, because you have more mass to redirect.
Where'd you learn that? Places I can't tell you about, doing things I can't describe. But I can teach you how to do it. All of you. If you're willing to forget everything you think you know and start over. Briggs stared at him for a long moment, then extended his hand. All right, man. I'm listening. Derek shook it, and something shifted in the room. Not surrender, but openness. The door was cracked. Now he had to walk through it. The weeks that followed were grueling. Derek trained the trainers first. Paul, Diana, James, and the senior team. 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. He started with awareness drills, not combat techniques. Made them walk through crowded spaces blindfolded and identify sounds, directions, threats by ear alone. Made them sit in restaurants and map every exit, every potential weapon, every person who entered or left, and write it down from memory afterward. Paul hated it. This is kindergarten stuff, man. We know how to observe. Then do the drill. Write down the description of every person who walked in during the last hour. Paul couldn't do it. He got 6 out of 14. Diana got 9. James got 11, which was the best in the group, but still not good enough. In Force Recon, you'd wash out at anything under 13, Derek said. Because the one person you miss is the one carrying the IED, the one wearing the suicide vest, the one who's been sitting quietly in the corner for 45 minutes, waiting for a target. Observation isn't passive. It's a skill, and it degrades the moment you stop training it. He retrained their physical techniques from scratch, threw out the aggressive, escalation-heavy approach, and replaced it with what he called controlled response, a system built on 3 principles. First, create distance. Second, control the threat without harm if possible. Third, use force only when the first 2 fail, and only the minimum required. But what if the minimum isn't enough? James asked during one session. Then you increase incrementally. You never jump to maximum. Because maximum means someone goes to the hospital or the morgue, and that means lawsuits, investigations, and a client who's on the evening news for all the wrong reasons. What if it's your life or theirs? Then you do what you have to do. But if you followed steps 1 and 2 correctly,
you almost never reach that point. The goal isn't to win fights. The goal is to make fights unnecessary. James nodded slowly. You sound like my old SWAT commander. Smartest guy I ever worked for. What happened to him? Retired. Moved to Montana. Raises bees now. Smart man. Gradually, the team came around. Not all at once. Trust in this world was earned in inches, not miles. But by the end of the first month, Paul had stopped challenging and started asking questions.
Diana brought her own ideas, blending her FBI interrogation training with Derek's physical techniques to create psychological de-escalation protocols. James became Derek's most dedicated student, staying after sessions to drill techniques until his hands were raw. And the program worked. Aegis's first corporate client to go through Derek's new curriculum was a tech company with a CEO who'd received death threats. The protective detail, trained by Derek, led by Paul, handled 3 incidents during a 2-week engagement without a single physical confrontation. Threat identified, space created, principal evacuated, situation resolved. Clean, professional, invisible. Vivian called Derek into her office after the debrief. The client just signed a 2-year contract. They specifically cited the quality of the protective team. They said, and I'm quoting, "These are the first security people we've worked with who didn't make us feel like we were in a war zone." That's the point.
You did that, Derek, in 6 weeks. The team did it. I just changed how they think. Don't do that. Do what? Deflect. You rebuilt a program that wasn't working, won over a team that didn't trust you, and delivered results that just doubled our annual contract value. Own it. Derek shifted in his chair. Compliments still felt like clothes that didn't fit. He could wear them, but they pinched in strange places. In the Marines, you didn't get praised for doing your job. You got praised for surviving it. Okay, he said. I did it. Good. Now do it again. I have 3 more clients waiting. Meanwhile, Richard Ashford made his moves. It started small, just as Vivian had predicted. A building inspector showed up at Derek's apartment. Anonymous complaint about a possible mold issue. The inspection found nothing, but it cost Derek a day of work and left Naya confused about why a stranger was opening their closets.
Daddy, why was that man looking at our walls?
He was making sure our apartment is safe, Princess.
Is it?
It's safe, I promise. 2 weeks later, Derek's car registration was flagged for discrepancy. A clerical error that had never existed before. It took 3 trips to the DMV and $140 in fees to resolve. Then, a letter from Naya's school, forwarded from the district office, requesting verification of Derek's residential address and employment status. Routine, the letter said, random audit. Derek knew better. Each incident was isolated, untraceable. The kind of bureaucratic harassment that could be explained away as coincidence, bad luck, the normal friction of life. But Derek recognized the pattern the way he recognized an ambush. Not by the individual elements, but by the coordination. Ashford was probing, testing, looking for the crack. The CPS call came on a Tuesday.
Derek was at Aegis, midway through a training session, when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something told him to answer.
Mr. Coleman, this is Sandra Price with the Department of Children and Family Services. We've received a report regarding your daughter, Naya Coleman, and we'd like to schedule a home visit. The floor tilted. Derek gripped the edge of the training table and kept his voice level. What kind of report? I'm not able to disclose the specifics of the complaint over the phone, Mr. Coleman. But I want to assure you this is routine. We investigate all reports. It doesn't mean when. We'd like to come by Thursday if that works. Around 4 p.m.? Fine. Thursday, 4 o'clock. He hung up, stood very still. The training room was empty. The session had ended while he was on the phone. Through the glass partition, he could see Paul and Diana reviewing notes. Normal day. Normal people doing normal work. Derek walked to Vivian's office, closed the door behind him. It happened. Vivian looked up, read his face, set down her pen. CPS? Home visit. Thursday. Okay, sit down. We prepared for this. Preparing for it and living it are two different things, Vivian. His voice cracked. Just barely. Just enough. They're coming to my home. They're going to look at how I raise my daughter. They're going to judge whether I'm a fit parent because some rich man with a grudge picked up a phone. And they're going to find nothing, because there is nothing to find. Derek, listen to me. Your apartment is clean. Naya is healthy, happy, enrolled in school. You have documented employment with a legitimate company. You have licensed childcare through the provider I connected you with. Your references include a school principal, a pediatrician, and your neighbor who's watched Naya for 2 years. Mrs. Delgado, who I personally helped get emergency childcare certification 3 weeks ago, specifically for this scenario. She passed. She's licensed now. Derek stared at her. You did that? I told you. I plan ahead. Vivian, if they take her, they won't. If they even suggest, they won't, Derek. This is what Ashford wants. He wants you panicking. He wants you making a mistake. Showing up at his office, making threats, giving him something real to report. That's the play. Push until the target self-destructs. I don't self-destruct. I know you don't. So prove it. Go home. Clean the apartment even though it's already clean. Put Naya's artwork on the fridge. Make sure her room looks like what it is. A little girl's room where she feels safe and loved. And when the social worker comes, you be exactly who you are. A father who gave up everything for his daughter. Derek took a breath, then another. The training kicked in. Not combat training, but the deeper stuff. Stress inoculation. The ability to function under pressure by controlling the breath, controlling the pulse, controlling the mind. Okay, he said. And Derek, don't go after Ashford. Not now. Not yet. I wasn't. Yes, you were. I saw your face when you walked in. You were calculating how long it would take to drive to the Ashford building and how many floors you'd have to clear to reach the 14th. I know that look. My brother gets it too. Derek almost denied it, but she was right. For 30 seconds after that phone call, the operator had surged back to the surface and started planning an assault. Not to kill. Derek didn't think that way anymore. But to confront. To grab Richard Ashford by his expensive lapels and explain in very specific terms what would happen if he continued threatening a 6-year-old girl's family. I won't go after him, Derek said. But this doesn't end with CPS. When the investigation clears, he'll try something else. And we'll be ready for that too. But right now, Thursday. Focus on Thursday. Derek went home early, picked Naya up from school, made her favorite dinner, mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs, which she called fancy pasta. They ate together at the kitchen table, and Naya told him about her day. A boy named Jaden had shared his crayons with her. Mrs. Patterson had read a story about a bear who was scared of the dark. They'd learned the number 7 in math. Daddy, 7 is my favorite number now. Why 7? Because it sounds like heaven. Mrs. Patterson says that's called a rhyme. She's right. Do you have a favorite number? Derek thought about it. 6. Why? Because that's how old you are. Naya grinned, the kind of grin that could end wars and heal wounds, and make a man forget for just a moment that the world outside this apartment was trying to take her away. Thursday came. Sandra Price arrived at 4:07 p.m. She was in her 40s, professional, neither warm nor cold. She carried a clipboard and the practiced neutrality of someone who'd walked into 1,000 homes and learned not to judge before looking. "Mr. Coleman, thank you for making time." "Come in." She looked around. The apartment was small, but clean. Naya's artwork covered the refrigerator. Her school photos lined the hallway. Her room was exactly what Vivian had said it should be, a little girl's sanctuary. Pink comforter, stuffed animals, a bookshelf organized by color, because Naya had insisted that books should look like rainbows. "Is Naya here?" "She's in her room, reading. I can bring her out." "In a moment. I'd like to talk to you first." They sat at the kitchen table. Sandra opened her file. Derek noticed she didn't make eye contact immediately. She was cataloging. The cleanliness, the food in the kitchen, the temperature of the apartment, the general feeling of the space. "Mr. Coleman, I want to be transparent. We received an anonymous report expressing concern about Naya's welfare. The report mentioned overnight absences by the primary caregiver and possible neglect. I worked night shifts, or I did. I've recently changed jobs. Naya stays with a licensed childcare provider when I'm not home." "Can you provide documentation?" Derek handed her a folder. Mrs. Delgado's certification, Aegis's employment verification letter, Naya's school attendance record. Perfect. Not a single absence. Her pediatrician's most recent checkup. Healthy. All vaccinations current. No concerns noted. Sandra reviewed each document. Her expression didn't change, but Derek noticed her pen slow down. She was finding what he'd already told her. Nothing. "Can I meet Naya?" "Of course. Naya, can you come out here, sweetheart?" Naya appeared in the hallway, clutching a book. She looked at Sandra with the cautious curiosity of a child assessing a new adult. "Hi, Naya. My name is Sandra. I just came to say hello and see how you're doing." "Are you a doctor?" "No, sweetheart. I just talk to kids sometimes to make sure they're happy." "I'm happy." Naya said it like a fact, like the sky is blue and water is wet, and I'm happy. "That's good. Can you tell me about your room? Your dad says you like to read." "I love reading. My daddy reads to me every night, even when he's really tired. He does the voices and everything." "The voices?" "For the characters. He does a really good dragon voice. It's scary, but funny." Sandra glanced at Derek. Something in her professional neutrality softened. "What's your favorite book?" "Right now? The Paper Bag Princess, because the princess saves the prince, and she doesn't even need armor. She just needs to be smart." "That's a great book." "Daddy bought it for me. He said smart is better than strong." Sandra closed her clipboard, looked at Derek, looked at Naya, looked around the apartment one more time. "Mr. Coleman, I'm going to be honest with you. This report doesn't match what I'm seeing. Your documentation is thorough. Your daughter is healthy, articulate, and clearly well cared for. Her school records are excellent." "So what happens now?" "I'll file my report. The investigation will formally close within 30 days. If no additional reports are filed, this is done." "And if additional reports are filed?" Sandra paused. She looked at him carefully, not as a social worker assessing a parent, but as a person reading another person. "Mr. Coleman, in my experience, when anonymous reports don't match the home environment, there's usually a reason. I can't tell you what to do about that reason, but I can tell you that my report will clearly state that this home is stable, safe, and loving. and that any future reports should be evaluated in that context. Thank you. Thank your daughter. She's the most compelling evidence I've seen all week. Sandra left.
Derek closed the door, leaned his forehead against it, exhaled.
Daddy, was that lady making sure you take good care of me? Yeah, baby. That's what she was doing. That's silly. You take the best care of me. Derek turned around. Naya was standing in the hallway, book still in hand, looking at him with an expression so certain, so unshakable, that it nearly undid him. Come here, princess. She ran to him. He picked her up, held her against his chest, felt her arms wrap around his neck. 6 years old, 42 pounds, his entire universe. Daddy, you're squeezing too tight. Sorry. It's okay. I like it. He held her for a long time, long enough for his heartbeat to slow, long enough for the rage to settle back into its cage, long enough to make a decision. He wasn't going to go after Richard Ashford. Not because he was afraid, not because Vivian had told him not to, because Ashford had just played his best card and lost. The CPS investigation would clear. The documentation was airtight. And now, there was a social worker's report on file that described Derek Coleman as an exemplary single father. Ashford had given him armor and didn't even know it. Derek put Naya down, made popcorn, let her pick a movie. She chose the one about the fish again, and sat next to her on the couch while she leaned against his arm and laughed at jokes she'd heard 30 times. After she fell asleep, he carried her to bed, tucked her in, stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. Then he went to the kitchen table, opened his laptop, a used one Vivian had lent him, and pulled up everything Aegis had compiled on Ashford properties. Business filings, subsidiary structures, board connections, patterns. He wasn't going after Ashford, but he was going to map every inch of the terrain, because the storm wasn't over. Ashford had lost the CPS card, but a man like that didn't stop. He adapted. He found new angles. Derek would be ready for every single one. He worked until 2 a.m. Old habits. But this time, instead of walking empty warehouse hallways and watching dead monitors, he was building something. A defense so thorough, so documented, so ironclad that when Ashford came again, and he would come again, he'd find nothing to grip. No leverage, no weakness, no crack. Just a wall. Built by a man who knew exactly how to build walls that didn't break. Derek saved his files, closed the laptop, checked on Naya one more time. Still sleeping, still breathing, still safe. He lay down on the couch, closed his eyes, and for the first time in 6 years, Derek Coleman slept without dreaming of war. The CPS case closed in 22 days. Sandra Price's report was thorough, professional, and unambiguous. Derek Coleman was a fit parent. Naya Coleman was a healthy, well-adjusted child in a stable home. No evidence of neglect. No evidence of endangerment. Case closed. File sealed. Derek read the letter 3 times at the kitchen table, then folded it and put it in the drawer with Naya's birth certificate, his DD-214, and the only photograph he had of Serena holding their daughter. Taken in the delivery room, 47 minutes before she died. The drawer of things that mattered too much to leave out in the open. Vivian called that afternoon. "It's done," he said. "I know. Sandra Price's supervisor copied me on the closure notification. I'm listed as your employer reference." "You expected this." "I planned for it. There's a difference. Expecting means hoping. Planning means building." Sounds like something a Marine would say. "I learned from one." Derek paused. What now? Now you do your job. Ashford played his strongest civilian card and it bounced. He'll pull back. Men like him always do when the cost-benefit shifts. He's vindictive, but he's not stupid.
Going after a single father with a clean CPS report and a documented employment history is a losing play, and he knows it. You think he's done? I think he'll find someone else to bully. That's what men like Richard Ashford do. They don't fight wars, they fight people. And when one person stops being an easy target, they move on to the next one. Vivian was right. Over the following weeks, the pressure evaporated. No more anonymous complaints. No more building inspectors. No more mysterious flags on his car registration. The silence from Ashford Properties was complete, and Derek recognized it for what it was. Not surrender, but retreat. A tactical withdrawal by a man who'd calculated the odds and decided the fight wasn't worth the exposure. Derek didn't celebrate. Marines didn't celebrate the absence of enemy fire. They used it to fortify. And fortify he did. The next 12 months were the most productive of Derek's life. His training program expanded from a single curriculum into a comprehensive system that Vivian branded the Coleman Protocol. 3 tiers: awareness, control, response. Each tier built on the one before. Each tier tested through scenarios that Derek designed from his own experience. Modified, sanitized, stripped of classified details, but grounded in the reality of what happened when situations went sideways. Word spread the way it always does in the security world. Not through advertising, but through results. A corporate client told another corporate client. A law enforcement agency sent observers to a training session and left with a contract proposal. A federal agency, Derek couldn't say which one, requested a private briefing on his de-escalation methodology. Vivian's company grew. 16 employees became 24. 24 became 36. They moved to a larger facility. Derek got an office with a window, which he found deeply uncomfortable for the first 2 weeks, because 8 years of military training had taught him that windows were vulnerabilities, not perks. "You going to close those blinds every day forever?" Paul asked, leaning in his doorway. "They're a tactical liability. They're windows, Derek. In an office building. In suburban Virginia. I know what they are. Then open the blinds and enjoy the sunlight like a normal human being." Derek opened the blinds. The sunlight felt strange on his face. Good strange. The kind of strange that came from allowing yourself something you'd been denying for no good reason. His salary increased. 90 became 105. Vivian promoted him to Chief Training Officer, with authority over all defensive programs and a seat at the leadership table. He bought a car that started on the first try. He moved himself and Naya out of the apartment with the leaking ceiling and into a small house with a yard. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that actually had counter space, and a backyard with a tree that Naya immediately claimed as her kingdom. "Daddy, this is our house?" "This is our house." "With a yard?" "With a yard." "Can I get a dog?" "Let's survive the first month." She hugged him so hard he felt his ribs creak. Then she ran outside and stood under the tree with her arms spread wide, spinning in circles, laughing at the sky. Derek stood at the back door and watched her, and something inside him that had been clenched for 6 years finally let go. Not all the way. Maybe not ever all the way. But enough to breathe. Mrs. Delgado came to see the new house. She walked through every room, touching the walls, opening the cabinets, inspecting the bathroom like a general reviewing barracks. Then she stood in the kitchen, looked at Derek, and burst into tears. "Maria, what's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, mijo. Everything is right. I watched you carry that little girl up those stairs every morning for 2 years.
I watched you eat rice and beans 5 nights a week so she could have chicken. I watched you go to that warehouse every night and come home like a ghost. And now look." She gestured around the kitchen. "Look at this. It's just a house." "It's not just a house. It's what happens when a good man finally gets what he deserves. Don't you tell me it's just a house. You earned every wall." Derek didn't cry. He hadn't cried since Serena's funeral. But he held Mrs. Delgado while she cried for him, and that was close enough. Naya started 2nd grade, made friends, joined the school art club, came home with paintings that progressed from horse clouds to something resembling actual horses. Her teacher sent a note home that said Naya was exceptionally empathetic and demonstrates leadership qualities beyond her age.
Daddy, what's empathetic mean? It means you understand how other people feel.
Is that good? That's the best thing a person can be. Better than strong? Way better than strong. At Aegis, Derek found something he hadn't expected. Purpose. Not the military kind, where purpose came pre-assigned and failure meant death. A different kind. The kind that grew from choosing to be somewhere, choosing to build something, choosing to teach people how to protect instead of how to destroy. He trained a corporate security team that successfully de-escalated a workplace violence incident without injury. He trained a personal protection detail that kept a tech billionaire's family safe during a kidnapping threat. He trained a group of school security officers who, 6 months later, talked a disturbed student into putting down a weapon without anyone getting hurt. The student got counseling instead of a body bag. The principal called Derek personally. "Your training saved a child's life today, Mr. Coleman. My training gave your officer the tools. He made the choice. He's the hero." "He says you are." "He's wrong, but tell him I'm proud of him." 18 months after that lunch at Riverside Bistro, Vivian called Derek into her office and closed the door. She looked different, not stressed, focused. The particular focus that Derek recognized from mission briefings, the kind that meant something big was coming, and the margin for error was thin. "I have a situation," she said, "and I need your honest answer before I explain it. Because once I explain it, you won't be able to say no." "That's a hell of an opening." "I know you, Derek. That's why I'm warning you." "Go ahead." "Federal prosecutor named Catherine Torres. She's testifying against the Delgado Reyes cartel next week. The case has been building for 3 years. She's the lead witness. Without her testimony, the case collapses, and 14 indictments go away. And someone doesn't want her to testify. Someone has made that very clear. 2 credible threats intercepted by the FBI in the last month. A surveillance team was spotted outside her home last week. And yesterday, her 7-year-old daughter's school photo was mailed to the courthouse in an unmarked envelope. Derek's stomach dropped. He felt it. The cold, heavy sensation he'd learned to associate with missions that mattered. Missions where the stakes weren't strategic or political, but human. A child's face in an envelope. A message that said, "We know where she is. We know what she looks like. We can reach her." The FBI is handling primary security for Torres during the trial, Vivian continued. But they've requested supplemental protection for her family, specifically her daughter, Sophia. They want a private detail, someone with special operations experience, someone who can operate independently if needed. They came to us. Why not their own people? Because their own people are spread thin. The cartel has assets everywhere. Law enforcement, judicial staff, even inside the bureau. They want someone outside the system, someone they can trust precisely because he isn't part of any system. Derek sat with it. A 7-year-old girl, Sophia, the same age as Naya, give or take a few months. A child who'd done nothing wrong, except be born to a mother brave enough to stand up to people who moved drugs and bodies across borders like cargo. It could be dangerous, Vivian said. If the cartel identifies the detail, you become a target. Not a theoretical target, a real one. These people don't send anonymous tips to CPS. They send bullets. I know what cartels send. I know you know. That's why I'm asking instead of assigning. This is your choice, Derek. No pressure, no judgment. You said, once I heard it, I wouldn't be able to say no. Can you? Derek thought of Naya.
Of tucking her in tonight and knowing that somewhere across the city, another father or mother was tucking in another little girl and wondering if she'd be safe tomorrow. Of the school photo in the envelope, a child's face used as a weapon. No, he said. I can't say no. I know. I have conditions. Name them. Naya stays with Mrs. Delgado for the duration. Full lockdown protocol. No changes to routine, no unusual pickups, no deviations. Paul runs counter-surveillance on my house while I'm gone. If anything feels off, he pulls Naya and Maria out immediately. Done. I pick my own team. 2 operators minimum. I want James on the detail. James and whoever else you need. And Vivian. If this goes sideways, if something happens to me, Naya goes to Mrs. Delgado. Not the state, not a foster home. Maria. Vivian's expression shifted. The CEO mask slipped, and underneath it, Derek saw something raw, something personal. Nothing is going to happen to you. Promise me anyway. I promise. Maria gets Naya. I'll make sure of it legally. Then I'm in. He went home that evening, made dinner, real dinner, not fancy pasta, actual food, because the new salary meant actual groceries. Naya sat across from him, talking about a science project involving volcanoes and baking soda. Daddy, did you know vinegar and baking soda make an explosion? I did know that. Mrs. Patterson says it's a chemical reaction, but I think it's magic. Maybe it's both. Can things be both? Derek looked at his daughter. Yeah, baby. Things can be both. After dinner, he told her he'd be away for a few days. Work trip. Mrs. Delgado would stay with her. He'd call every night. Naya's face fell. Not dramatically. She wasn't a dramatic kid. Just a quiet dimming, like a light turned down 1 notch. How many days? 3, maybe 4. That's a lot. I know. Is it important? There's a little girl, about your age. Her mom is doing something very brave, and some bad people are trying to scare them. I'm going to make sure the little girl stays safe. Naya processed this with the gravity of a child who took things seriously. Like what you did at the restaurant? With the mean men? Something like that, but bigger. Are you going to be safe? I'm going to be very safe. Promise? Promise. She hugged him, long and tight and silent. Then she pulled back and looked at him with Serena's eyes. Daddy? Yeah? Save her, like you saved me. Derek didn't know what she meant by that. Didn't know if she meant the restaurant, or the CPS visit, or the years of warehouse nights and coupon groceries and sleeping on couches so she could have the bedroom. Maybe she meant all of it. Maybe, at 6 years old, Naya understood something about her father that he was only beginning to understand about himself. That he didn't save people in spite of who he was. He saved people because of who he was. All of it. The operator and the father. The weapon and the shield. They were the same man. I will, Princess. The detail began the next morning. Derek, James, and a former Delta operator named Reeves
established a protective perimeter around Catherine Torres's home. The FBI provided intelligence updates. Derek ran the operation the way he'd run missions in the Marines: methodical, patient, precise. Day 1 was quiet. Too quiet. Derek didn't trust quiet. He positioned Reeves on counter-surveillance and had James running communications while he personally walked the exterior every 90 minutes. Catherine Torres was exactly what he'd expected. Tough, focused, terrified. Not for herself, for Sophia. "How do you do it?" she asked Derek on the second morning, watching him check the window sight lines for the third time. "Do what?" "Stay calm. I feel like I'm going to crawl out of my skin. Every car that drives by, every sound." "That's normal. Your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, heightening awareness in response to a threat. The trick isn't eliminating the fear, it's directing it." "How?" "Focus on what you can control: your testimony, your preparation, your daughter's routine. Let me handle the rest. That's what I'm here for." "Have you done this before? Protected someone like this?" "I've protected people in worse situations than this." "That doesn't make me feel better." "It should, because I'm still here." Catherine Torres looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, the way people nod when they've decided to trust someone. Not because they have proof, but because they have no other choice, and the person standing in front of them feels solid enough to lean on. Sophia was a different challenge. 7 years old, bright, confused about why she couldn't go to school and why there were strange men in her house. She reminded Derek so much of Naya that his chest ached every time she spoke.
"Are you a police officer?" she asked him on the first day. "No." "Then what are you?"
"I keep people safe."
"Like a bodyguard?"
"Something like that."
"My mom says bad people want to hurt us."
Derek knelt so he was at her eye level. "Your mom is right that there are bad people. But she's also very brave, and she has a lot of people helping her, including me. My job is to make sure nothing bad happens to you. Okay?"
"Okay."
Sophia studied his face.
"You have a daughter. I can tell."
"How can you tell?"
"Because you talk to me like a dad, not like a stranger."
Derek felt something crack in his chest. A small fissure, hairline thin, in the armor he'd worn every day since Serena died. This girl, this 7-year-old stranger, had seen through all of it in 30 seconds. "Yeah," he said. "I have a daughter. Her name is Naya. She's 6.
"Is she scared too?"
"She's brave, like you." Sophia smiled. Small, fragile, but real.
"Tell her I said hi."
"I will."
Day 2.
Reeves spotted a vehicle conducting counter-surveillance. Dark sedan, tinted windows. Circled the block 3 times at irregular intervals. Not a neighbor, not a delivery driver, not random traffic. Professional. Deliberate. "Contact," Reeves said over the comm. "Black sedan, plates obscured. 3rd pass in 40 minutes. "Track it," Derek said. "Don't engage. Get the plate when it passes the east corner. The angle should clear the obstruction." Reeves got the plate. Derek ran it through the FBI liaison. The car was registered to a rental company. The rental agreement was signed with a stolen identity. Dead end on paper. But the message was clear. The cartel knew where Catherine Torres lived, and they were watching. Derek called the FBI contact. "We need to move the family. Tonight." "We don't have authorization for a relocation." "Then get it. They've been made. Staying here is no longer a protective strategy. It's a fixed target." The FBI moved slowly. Bureaucracy, approvals, chain of command. Derek didn't have time for chain of command. he moved the family himself. At 10 p.m. on day 2, Derek loaded Catherine and Sophia into an unmarked vehicle. James drove. Reeves ran counter-surveillance from a chase car. They relocated to a safe house that Vivian had arranged through a contact at the U.S. Marshals Service. Unofficial, undocumented, known only to 4 people. "Where are we going?" Catherine asked, holding Sophia in the back seat. "Somewhere they can't find you." "How do you know they can't find us?" "Because I'm the one who found the location, and I'm better at this than they are." It wasn't arrogance, it was fact. Derek had spent years finding people who didn't want to be found, in countries where the infrastructure for hiding was 1,000 years more developed than anything a drug cartel could construct. He knew how to disappear. He knew how to make others disappear.
And he knew how to build a security perimeter that would hold against anything short of a military assault. The safe house held. Day 3 was the trial. Catherine Torres testified for 6 hours. Composed, detailed, devastating. The prosecution's case was built on her testimony, like a cathedral built on bedrock. Derek's team maintained the protective detail through the courthouse, coordinating with federal marshals, maintaining counter-surveillance on every approach. No incidents, no breaches, no contact. Not because the cartel didn't try. Reeves intercepted the 2-man surveillance team outside the courthouse at noon. He didn't confront them. He simply positioned himself where they could see him, made eye contact, and let them understand that they'd been identified. They left. Professionals recognize professionals, and whatever the cartel was paying those two, it wasn't enough to go against a team that had spotted them before they'd even set up. When the trial ended, Catherine Torres was escorted into witness protection. She'd disappear. New name, new city, new life. Sophia would go with her. But before she left, Catherine found Derek in the courthouse hallway. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. The adrenaline of the last 3 days was finally releasing, and the emotion underneath was breaking through. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. You moved us in the middle of the night. You stood between my daughter and people who wanted to use her as leverage. You didn't sleep for 3 days. I watched you." "It's my job." "No, it's more than that. I've been around security professionals for 3 years during this case. FBI agents, marshals, good people, competent people. But you were different. You weren't just protecting us. You cared. I could feel it. Sophia could feel it." Derek didn't respond. His throat was doing something inconvenient.
"Sophia asked me to give you something."
Catherine reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A drawing. Crayon on white paper. 2 figures, a tall one and a small one, holding hands. Above them, in shaky 7-year-old handwriting, "Thank you for keeping me safe." Derek took the drawing, looked at it. The tall figure had a square jaw and big hands. The small figure had brown hair and a pink dress. "Tell her she's a good artist," he said. His voice was rough. "She said to tell your daughter hi." Catherine hugged him. Quick, fierce, the embrace of a mother who'd been terrified for months and was finally allowing herself to believe it was over. Then she stepped back, took a breath, and walked down the hallway toward the marshals waiting to take her to her new life. Derek stood in the courthouse hallway, holding a crayon drawing, and the cracks in his armor opened wide enough to let the light through. He drove home that evening, picked up Naya from Mrs. Delgado's. She ran to him at the door, launched herself into his arms, and wrapped her legs around his waist like she was never letting go. "You came back." "I told you I would." "I know, but I'm still glad." "Me too, Princess. Me too." That night, after dinner, after bath time, after the bedtime story, 2 chapters because he'd been gone, and she negotiated hard. Naya lay in her bed and looked up at him.
Did you save her? The little girl?
She's safe. Her mom, too.
Good.
Naya pulled her covers up to her chin.
Daddy?
Yeah?
I want to learn what you teach.
Derek looked at his daughter, Serena's eyes, his jaw. A combination that the world wasn't ready for. What I teach?
How to keep people safe. When I grow up, I want to do what you do.
You've got time to decide that, baby.
I already decided.
He smiled, leaned down, kissed her forehead. Then we start with the most important lesson.
What's that?
Knowing when not to fight.
That's the most important one? That's the one that changes everything.
Naya considered this, then nodded, slowly, the way she always did when she was storing something important in a place where she wouldn't lose it.
Okay, Daddy. Teach me that one first.
I will, but first, sleep.
Will you be here in the morning?
I'll be here every morning.
Promise?
Promise. She closed her eyes. He sat on the edge of her bed until her breathing slowed, until her fingers relaxed around the edge of her blanket, until she was deep in the safe, unguarded sleep of a child who trusted her father completely. Then he stood, walked to the kitchen, and pinned Sophia's drawing on the refrigerator next to Naya's artwork. 2 little girls' drawings, side by side. One from his daughter, one from a stranger's daughter he'd kept alive. He sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. The yard was dark outside the window.
Somewhere across the city, Riverside Bistro was closing for the night, and the corner booth, where everything had started, sat empty. Years later, people would ask Derek Coleman about that day. The day he'd put a rich man's son on his knees over a table and a woman's right to eat lunch in peace. Reporters, clients, trainees who'd heard the legend and wanted to know if it was true. Derek never told the full story. The classified parts stayed classified. The personal parts stayed personal. What he told them was simpler. I saw someone who needed help. I helped. That's it. But it wasn't it. And he knew that. Because that moment in the restaurant wasn't the beginning of his story. It was the hinge. The 3 seconds where the man he'd been and the man he'd become collided. And instead of destroying each other, they merged into something stronger than either had been alone. He'd spent 8 years learning to be the most dangerous man in any room. He'd spent 6 years trying to pretend that man didn't exist. And it took 3 entitled strangers picking the wrong table on the wrong day to show him the truth. That the danger and the devotion, the weapon and the father, the darkness and the light, they were never separate. They were the same force, aimed in different directions. He just had to choose the direction. Derek Coleman chose protection. He chose teaching. He chose showing up for his daughter every morning and training other people to show up for the people counting on them. He chose a life that honored both the operator and the father, because they were both him, and denying either one meant being half a man. And on the rare occasions when the world tested that choice, when someone picked the wrong table, or threatened the wrong child, or assumed that the quiet man in the faded t-shirt was nobody worth worrying about, Derek was still there, still steady, still ready. Not because he wanted to fight, because he'd learned that the strongest thing a dangerous man could do was choose not to be dangerous, and mean it, and know with absolute certainty that if the moment came, the skills would be there. Not as violence, as vigilance. Not as destruction, as defense. A shield, not a sword. A wall, not a weapon. A father who built a life worth protecting, and then protected it with everything he had.
That was the story of Derek Coleman. Not the classified missions, not the military record, not the legend that grew around a 3-second wrist lock in a crowded restaurant. The real story was quieter than all of that. It was a man who woke up every morning, made breakfast for his daughter, went to work, taught people how to keep other people safe, and came home. Every day, without fail, without exception. Because some promises don't bend. Some training never fades. And sometimes the darkest chapter of a man's life becomes the foundation for everything that follows. If he's brave enough to stop running from it, and strong enough to use it for the right reasons. Wrong table, wrong day, gentlemen, and exactly the right man.